Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
You are sitting ringside with David Penzer on Radio Influence.
Welcome to the debut episode of Sitting Ringside with David Penzer. I am one David Penzer, and in future weeks and months, I'm going to have a producer who actually came to me about this idea, and we're going to have him as part of the broadcast and bounce ideas, and we're going to play a little game called, he's going to bring up a subject in WCW, and I'm going without me knowing what it was, and I'm going to tell the first thing that comes to my mind. But I wanted to start out just me and explain to the listeners who I am and why I wanted to do a podcast, or why I am doing a podcast, because it was never something that I thought I would be doing. It's quite simply, I was a huge wrestling fan who got to live their dream. I got to be the ring announcer for WCW in the Monday Night Wars. I got to work in production. I got to work in talent relations. I got to ride the roads with people like Arn Anderson and Ric Flair and Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero, rest his soul, and so many more that the list is endless. And I got to be friends with them to this day. I could call those guys, or I see them at a Hall of Fame or an event like that, and it's like 20 years hasn't gone by, and we just pick up where we left off. Wrestling is a fraternity. One of the reasons it's a fraternity is because you're basically with your wrestling family as much as, if not more than, your family at home. And back in the day before there was internet and cell phones, not to date myself, but it is what it is, and I've learned to accept it, all there was is telling stories and playing ribs. And while they still tell stories and play ribs, I would imagine that a lot of the wrestlers in today's vernacular that are riding down the roads or playing video games in their phones or texting or going on Twitter. And without that there was nothing else but to converse, to rib, to joke. It seems like yesterday that I'm riding with Arn Anderson and Ric Flair. The Steiner brothers are behind us, and they start throwing eggs at our car. And we're going to Charlotte. Don't have a clue where we were coming from, but we ended up in Charlotte. And so we stopped in and got some eggs in the 7-Eleven local store, and we spent 2 hours like little kids tossing eggs back and forth at each other like we're at a paintball place. And does it sound silly? Does it sound juvenile? I guess to some. Probably to some, the entire wrestling business sounds silly and juvenile. But to us, it was passing the time, having a good time, and just getting from one place to another without being bored. So I guess if you ask me the question, why am I doing a podcast? I guess it's so that I could tell you my stories and I could converse with people that lived those stories. Not only people that are the stars or were the stars of professional wrestling, but there's so many people that have stories to tell and interesting stories that weren't the big stars. We want to feature the Chavo Guerreros, the Chris Jerichos, the Justin Roberts, the Harlem Heat. The list goes on and on and on. I'd love to get Arn here, and I'd love to get Ric Flair on. The politics of that might be a little bit more difficult with them working with WWE, but we're going to try our best. That's all I can promise you. And those stories are interesting, and I could guarantee we're going to have fun. Listen, telling them, retelling them, laughing about them. But there's people that have worked behind the scenes that you don't know their names, maybe not, or you barely heard their names, that have the same stories, if not better stories. And so what I'm going to try to do, maybe not every episode, but as much as I can, is to try to bring those people out from behind the spotlight. We're going to call this segment Behind the Spotlight. And I want to bring those people out, producers, directors, talent relations, referees, other ring announcers, to tell their stories. Because like I said, I think you'll find, and I'm fairly confident, that those stories may be just as fun, if not more interesting, than the stories that you're going to hear from the names that you're familiar with. Many of you know me, as I said, from WCW Monday Night Wars. Some of you know me from TNA and now Impact Wrestling. I hope there's people listening that just know the name. I want to get one thing straight. As I said earlier, I was lucky to live my dream. I don't consider myself a celebrity. I don't consider myself an A-lister, a B-lister, or a C-lister. I don't walk around signing autographs, taking pictures. I work hard for a living, doing other jobs that I love to do, and I'm honored anytime I could talk professional wrestling, because unlike so many people who love the business from the outside, I got to love it from the inside, sitting ringside every night. Some of the greatest matches, some of the worst matches, some of the funnest angles, some of the worst angles. And there's no egos here. It's just me talking, telling my stories, and talking to other talent, both talent that you'll know and those behind the scenes, telling their stories. I am a huge fan of testimonials. So if there's anything about this show, if you're listening from the first one to the last one to all the ones in between, and I hope we do this for a long time, because I think there's a lot to talk about and a lot of people to talk to. I'd love to hear from you. At David Penzer is my Twitter handle. At Penzer Ringside is the show's Twitter handle. So I would love for you, if you're not already signed up for both, to go on Twitter and sign up. I'm happy to talk wrestling. I'm happy to talk current wrestling, past wrestling, answer questions. We could talk about Impact Wrestling that I'm back doing. Talk about Never Say Never. But I also like to hear your honest opinions about the podcast. Never thought I'd be doing a podcast. You know, they said do a podcast. It'd be fun. You got a lot to say, and time will tell. But I honor and request your feedback, both positive and negative. Will always be taken and thought through. And I hope we could just have some fun. If I could name one word to describe what I'd like to do, and, you know, we're going to do a lot of things, and some may catch and some may not, and we'll try to stick with the stuff that people like and get rid of the stuff that people don't like. But I want you to have fun. There's a lot of bigger names that have podcasts. There's a lot of richer guys that have podcasts. There's a lot of Hall of Famers that have podcasts, and they all have something to tell and stories to tell, and I appreciate everything that they have to talk about. I'm coming from you for a different perspective. I'm a fan who got to be a part of it, still gets to be a part of it, knows the guys that I used to call my heroes, knows the guys that I used to want to meet and take pictures with and get autographs of. And I don't say that in a cocky way. I say that because I hope that you could feel like you're sitting with a down-to-earth wrestling fan who wants to talk wrestling. I'll be honest with you. I'm not getting a dime for doing this. If I ever am able to get sponsors, that would be a cool thing, to have somebody care enough that I'm doing a decent job. But I'm not doing this for money, and I'm not doing this for fame. I'm doing this because I want to talk. I want to bring something, you know, maybe I guess I could summarize it as this, as a thank you to the fans who gave me the opportunity to entertain them, even though I wasn't the people they were coming to see every night. Thank you to the people in the business who gave me an opportunity to to do something that I had always wanted to do, and a thank you to the people in the business that continue to do so. Been involved more in the professional wrestling business in the last 2 years than I was in the 10 years prior. And like I said earlier, it's an honor that anybody knows who I am. It's an honor that anybody wants to listen to my podcast. And I will always take to heart and try to give you the best product I can. And with that, let's get to our first guest on our first ever podcast, former WWE ring announcer and one of the only people other than myself who got to do this for a living. But this guy got to do Wrestlemania, something I never got to do. Justin Roberts. So when I decided to do a podcast and I had to think about who my first guest was going to be, since the name of the podcast is Sitting Ringside with David Penzer, that's me, it was only natural that I interview for my first guest somebody who's probably been sitting ringside around as much as I have in the last 20 years, maybe more. What do you think, Justin?
I was there, I was at WWE for 12 years. I've been doing wrestling for about 21 years.
So I think it's a tie. Ladies and gentlemen, my first guest is former WWE ring announcer, Justin Roberts. It's a pleasure to have him here. Just before, we're going to do this a couple times, but I want to just let you know about his book, which is Best Seat in the House. He wrote it all by himself, no ghostwriter. I read it this weekend. It's an easy read. And more than anything, it's from the heart. I mean, the book, whether anybody likes it or anybody hates it, I can't imagine why anybody would hate it, but it's from the heart. You wrote it from the heart, and I give you a lot of credit. And you want to tell the fans where they could get it? I downloaded your book on Kindle. It's the first Kindle thing I ever did in my life. So I'm getting with technology. So I know it's available on Amazon and Amazon Kindle, but you want to tell the rest?
Yeah, actually, if you go to justinrobertsbook.com, there's links to everywhere it's available. And as of today, while we're recording this, it's available. The audiobook is available. So you get links to the hardcover, the ebook, and the audiobook all on justinrobertsbook.com.
I definitely recommend it, and we'll plug it a couple of times because it's a great read. Justin,
I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. Justin is coming to us from Northern California, where he's on tour with the rock and roll band Tool. And before we hit up our discussion on professional wrestling and how you got involved and maybe compare notes a little bit on what we did, I am a huge mark for rock and roll tours. My second dream job after professional wrestling was to be a tour manager for a rock and roll band. So tell me what you're doing on the tour, if you don't mind, how it differs from a professional wrestling tour.
It's a lot different. It's funny because I'm going to a lot of the same arenas that I've gone to for years, but now it's all new faces around the arenas, and it's a lot different. In wrestling, you have long days and you do your show, and then you have to stay awake at the wheel to drive to the next town. And with this, I'm on a really nice tour bus, a hotel on wheels, and the atmosphere is great. I'm not walking on eggshells. It's fun. The group is great. Tool is just comprised of great musicians. They're very talented. Their shows are incredible. They're great to work with, and it's been really cool. It's my third tour that I've done with them, and it's a neat experience. Just going town to town in the bus, and actually getting to spend some time in some of the cities. Like today, it's actually my second day off in where am I? Santa Clara. So to actually have time off in a city, a lot of the cities that I've gone to forever, and I just never had a chance to see or do anything, actually get a little bit of time once in a while. We'll have an off day, and had time to actually go explore. It's been neat.
That's cool. And you do the Q&A of for the VIPs, correct?
Yeah, they host this really cool event where it's usually usually the guitarist Adam Jones will talk about everything Tool, and I kind of moderate that and host the event, and we do some really neat things. If you're a Tool fan, even if you're just into music, we do some really neat things, and the people walk away with a great experience. So it's fun.
That sounds awesome, and I appreciate you indulging me on that because you probably weren't expecting that. But Like I said, I'm a big mark to be on a rock and roll tour. The closest I got was riding from the hotel to the arena in Leonard Skinner's tour bus.
That's awesome.
Those
How was
guys are
that?
big wrestling fans. Oh, that was awesome. That was when they did a Super Bowl weekend in Atlanta. They did a return to Fox Theater, and so I rode with them, and they're really good guys. And but I never got to do a whole tour with them. But when we've had discussions before, but not in depth. And when I started reading your book, my assumption was that your story was similar to my story. And after I read the book, and after I've now heard your story, I want to say that the beginning is very similar. How we got there is very similar, but the results are a little bit different. And I was a little surprised by that. And before we get into that part, tell me and the fans on my premiere podcast of Sitting Ringside, what interested you in professional wrestling?
I love the characters. That's why whenever people ask me who my favorite was, I never had a favorite. I love the characters. The Brother Loves, the Genius, the Mr. Perfects, the Ultimate Warriors. It was like something I'd never seen before. I had discovered Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and I discovered basically Saturday Night's Main Event. And just the characters that I saw on my television were really unique. And it wasn't like seeing a movie or a TV show. It was seeing like these larger-than-life superheroes. And they were going out there and good versus evil. And it was just really unique. It was an escape, in grade school for me. And I lived for watching it. I was just really entertained by it more so than anything else that I had been into. And I always say, like, I'm not a huge sports fan. Growing up in Chicago, I watched the Chicago Bulls. We had an amazing team.
Yes, you did.
Back in my childhood. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, B.J. Armstrong. I mean, we had an awesome team. So I watched the Bulls games. But that was really it. I wasn't a big sports guy, aside from watching the Bulls. But I loved watching wrestling, and I didn't need anything else because wrestling was on every week. There was no off season. So I loved everything about wrestling. It was always there.
So you fell in love with wrestling. I'm trying to sort of compare and contrast our stories, if that's okay with you, because I think it might be interesting to the fans.
Yeah, I'm curious. I haven't read your book yet.
I don't have a book.
I know. Waiting for it.
I got a podcast now.
Then I'll find out your story now on this podcast.
Well, similar stuff. I fell in love with wrestling, and I want this to be about you, not so much about me, but I like to contrast the stories. When did you think, or when did you try to get involved in the wrestling business? When, how old were you, and what was your attempt? Because one thing that's static throughout the whole book, one thing that is a theme, is that there's pretty much nothing that you can't do when you set your mind to it, whether it's meeting one of your favorite stars or trying to get a job, or you seem to have a way about you that I don't, which is to decide you're going to do something and find a way to do it. I was able to pull that off in wrestling, but you're able to pull it off in a lot of other ways, which I was really impressed by. But when was it that you finally decided, okay, I want in, and this is how I'm going to do it, and how'd you do it?
I started basically as a voice on a wrestling hotline. That was really
Enzo Reed, correct?
You know it.
I never knew that about you.
Yeah, that was. That's it. I think CM Punk still has me in his phone as Enzo. That's how he met me. I was Enzo. So I started doing the hotline just because I love doing anything wrestling, and I kind of used that to get an announcing gig on a wrestling show for a local promotion. So, hey, it's me, Enzo Reed, the guy that does the hotline. Do you think maybe I could be a ring announcer for your show? And they already had a ring announcer, so they brought me to do one match, and I ended up doing two matches, and that's where it all started.
And you're how old at this? You're how old at this time?
16 for that first show.
Wow. And backtracking just a little bit, where'd you get the news from?
Just
like
that
Wrestling Observer, stealing off the Observer like everybody else did?
Exactly, like Observer, Torch, Alex Marvez.
I grew up with Alex Marvez.
Yeah. What was the other name? The guy who, Dan Levitard, I think he does something now like with ESPN or one of the sports shows. I remember calling that hotline. So I used to call like other hotlines, or friends would have newsletters, or I subscribed to the Torch, and like I would take that news and just like, hey, this is Enzo Reed, and you're calling the hotline, and today here's the news. And just read other people's news.
Well, there's no shame in ripping off the dirt sheets for the hotline, because Mean Gene made a lot of money doing it in WCW. So no need to
1-900-909-9900.
Yes, sir. Ask your parents' permission before calling. But so you got to ring announce that first match. That must have been a blast. How nervous were you?
I was nervous and awful. Nobody really like told me exactly what to do, and my friend Dave Prazak was the ring announcer on the show, and I have the video of like that first show with those two matches, and I'm awful, and just I was nervous. I was definitely nervous and not good at all. Very horrible. But I did it, so that was cool. I got to stand in a wrestling ring and be an announcer. Play wrestling announcer.
This is something I didn't know until I read the book, that around this time you were actually at the big contract signing hullabaloo at MGM Studios for when Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart signed with WCW, and I remember that going down. So you're just there as a fan.
Yeah, I happened to be going on a cruise out of Florida, and we're going to spend some days at the parks and then some days on the ship. And I scheduled it loosely because I knew that was happening around that time. And then when it came closer, made it work. So I was going to be at MGM that day for the signing in and the parade.
I'm just curious if once you got to the big time and became friends with a lot of the guys, did you ever tell Hulk that or Jimmy that or any of those guys? Because they would have got a kick out of it, I bet.
I told Gene, because I showed Mean Gene the photo of him and I from that day. There's a picture that we took that day. I just graduated junior high and 14 years old, and it was cool. It was really cool. I didn't meet Hulk that day, but I took some pictures of him.
Yeah, I saw there's a picture in your book. So so you announced two matches at an independent show, and you fall in love immediately with ring announcing, or are you just so happy to be a part of the business?
That was my, I want to say, easy way in. I didn't know any other way to get in. Wrestling would be, in my head, you have to go to wrestling school and to be a manager, to go to wrestling school, to be a rep, to go to wrestling school. And I didn't know from that back then because we didn't have the internet. We had the Yellow Pages, and there was nothing in the Yellow Pages about how to do that. So
there was a reason for that, by the way.
What was that?
There's a reason for that.
Right. So I was just happy to be a part of the show, and I thought it was neat, and I was able to do that for the next 2 years. For my junior and senior year in high school, I was the ring announcer for PWI in Chicago, Pro Wrestling International. And I talk about all the guys that I crossed paths with in those 2 years. And then once I went out to school in Tucson, that's when I started discovering other independent groups and promoters and gigs.
Now, let me ask you a question, because you're a big guy. I'm 5'6" with no athletic ability, so I knew I had no other shot. But you're a big guy and, work out every day, or it looks like it at least. Looking back on it, if you would have known about wrestling schools, do you think you could have made it as a wrestler? Do you think you would have enjoyed that as much?
I don't know. I looked in the mirror back then. I was 15 years old, and I tell the story about talking to Tony DeVito and wanting to be a wrestler. But I just I looked in the mirror and knew that I didn't have a wrestler's build, and I didn't start working out until after I was with WWE. Really, in 2003 is I think when I started actually training. I did it in college sporadically. I just wasn't. It wasn't like a daily thing. the gym for me was something. When wrestling became my career, the gym became my new hobby since that spot was open. But I didn't think that I looked like a wrestler. What they do, as you and I both know, is hard work, and you really have to be talented to do what they do. And I think the ring announcer spot was a better fit for me.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice, but you made it work as well. And so moving on with your story, you got to Tucson. You were going to college. I think I saw you out there. I did an indie shot out there, and I think you were refereeing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We, I think it was for Henry Hubbard.
Henry Hubbard.
Yep. I would.
Don't. If you ever see Henry Hubbard, don't mention my name.
I would usually announce the shows, and he brought you in, so they didn't need an announcer. So it was like, hey, I'll ref. And I learned to ref so I could work a tour with Mr. Perfect.
That must have been a blast. Any stories you could tell?
He would always refer to me as the Tom Zink looking kid. He used to always tell me that I looked like Tom Zink.
It's not a bad thing.
He would tell Tom Zink stories. I was a big mark for him, and that's why I learned to referee, just so I could be on this tour with him. That was the only reason. And at one point, they had a ring announcer for it, and they still let me get on the mic for some reason as a referee, and I cut a promo with him in the ring, him and Animal.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.
Paul and Paul Ellering were standing behind me, and there was it Public Enemy? Yeah, it was Public Enemy. And it was cool. I got to cut a promo with Mr. Perfect standing behind me. And then he grabbed my arm at one point, and my arm was very scrawny, and it bruised. So I had the perfect bruise. So I took pictures with it the next day. I was very proud of it. At one point, he bought me a beer. I think that was after that tour. He bought beers, and by the time the show was done, they were all gone, so I didn't get to have one. But when he was in WWE, we were at a hotel bar, and he came around and brought us all in Bud Lights. And I was like, cool, I finally got the perfect beer.
Did you ever get to gargle a shot of whiskey with him?
I did not. I'm glad for that. I probably wouldn't have been very good at that.
Yeah, but you had to do it if you wanted to hang. But yeah, he was. I could do a whole show about Mr. Perfect. It might not be a bad idea. Kurt was a great guy. And both of us also great that we got to get to know him a little bit. And you learned to referee. I didn't know that was in the book, but I didn't realize that was I thought that was a little hyperbole that you learned to referee, especially just for that match. That's for that tour. That's awesome.
Yeah. So because I learned to ref for that tour with him, when it came time to Henry's show that you were announcing, it was like, cool, I can still work and I'll ref. You and I took a picture that day.
Yeah, I remember. I think Public Enemy was there, Norman Smiley, Disco Inferno. It was interesting times. Henry's an interesting guy. But we digress. So you're in Tucson, and I know from your book that you went to I had to ask you about this because I don't remember this, so you might be able to tell me something about my life. You went to a Thunder in Tucson in August of 2000, and you were talking to Jackie Crockett Jr., who was a cameraman for WCW and very involved. Am I correct?
Yeah, he was one of the people I talked to.
And you were trying to give him a videotape, which hell, I don't blame you. And he said that your timing was good because I had gotten in trouble at Nitro the day before. I knew you were gonna bring that. There was a flight. I don't know if it was the night before, or the week before. Whatever I'd said in the book. There was a flight, and maybe you were drinking, and maybe there was something minor, something stupid, but that's why he made that comment. Yeah, I got suspended for a week for that. That was all I did is look. Scott Steiner was in coach. I was in first class. I didn't want it to be that way, but by the time I found out, it was too late. And I know this is an interview with you, but I might as well tell the story if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Scott Steiner instructed me to get 3 bottles of vodka, little airplane bottles, and roll them down the aisle from first class to coach. And when Scott Steiner instructs you to do something, especially back in those days when he was, people use the word unhinged a lot these days, different ways. When he was a little bit unhinged back then. So when he asks you to do it or tells you to do it, you did it. And that wasn't appreciated by the passengers and the staff. So I got written up for that. But that I didn't realize that was what it was. So I was in trouble, and you handed them the tape. And I remember the frat party in Tucson that Arn went. And I wonder if the reason I didn't go is because I was in trouble and I had to hang low. But I'll never forget. I'll never forget that. And to this day, until I read your book, I didn't know that was your fraternity party and you had invited them. But I remember that vividly, that a bunch of the guys went out and ended up at a frat party and had a blast.
Right.
So tell me who else was there? Arn Anderson. Tell me a little bit.
There's a couple marks in the fraternity. So we're standing up there and Arn walks through. We're like, Arn Anderson just walked through the front door of our fraternity house.
How'd you get him in there? You went to the local bar and said, "Hey, come to my frat house."
They stayed at the hotel that was right down the street, and I went over and kind of knew a couple of guys, just from indie stuff, and I just said, "Hey guys, we have a fraternity house down the street. We're having a party tonight. All the stars aligned." And next thing I know, it was like Rey Mysterio, the Nitro Girls, Mike Awesome, Arn Anderson. Who else?
I want to say Conan ended up there, maybe?
Yeah, I think Conan was there. I've got pictures. So if I'm forgetting somebody or some buddies, but that was the gist. It wasn't a big group. But the trainer, was it Dave?
Chuck? The trainer. Back then there was a couple of trainers. I can't think of his name, but I could see his face. He rode with me and Arn and Charles Robinson. Yeah. That was our little crew. Now I can't think of his name, and I'll get in trouble. But
that would have been cool if Charles Robinson showed up, but he didn't.
No, Charles doesn't drink. You know that. So
he still could have shown up if he knew that we were going to be friends in the future.
Yeah. So, but I'll never. And I was always good for a party. So I'm assuming the only reason that I didn't go is because I was hanging low because I knew I was in trouble. But
it's a good thing. I probably would have broken your leg at my fraternity, so I could have taken your spot.
It would have been a different book. But no, for the fans that are listening, the boys had a blast. Everybody was talking about it. I can't imagine what your fraternity brothers were saying about it the next day, partying with guys like Arn Anderson, who, as you know, is one of the funniest people in the history of pro wrestling. Off behind the scenes. So when I read that, it was like boom! I couldn't believe that was your party. So that was a cool memory back in time. I'll have to remind Arn about that next time I talk to him. So you're in college and you're really making some waves and doing some stuff and booking a little bit, correct? Local promotion?
Yeah. Ran some shows. Was doing anything I could. Just I wanted to grow. So I ran my own shows. I announced anything I could. Anything, literally. I mean, I announced girls softball at U of A. Anything I could do to get experience.
And around this time you started, if I'm remembering correctly, I took a little bit of notes, but I didn't want to write too much down because I want us to have a fun discussion. But that's when you first started contacting WWF at the time?
Yeah, actually it was that same year. I was living at the fraternity house and turned on SmackDown, and that's when I saw that Lillian was on. And the ring announcers since I was a kid, had always been like older men at WWF. And I thought, okay, well, if that doesn't have to be the case anymore, maybe I have a shot. And started sending out tapes to them, was sending out tapes to WCW because, not like trying to take your gig, but there were other shows, and you never knew because I know they brought in, was it Keith Butler?
Yeah, finally I tapped out after about 8 years of doing every single show. on the road, I tapped out and had to get somebody to give me a weekend off. So they let me pick. They let me pick my backup. So, but yeah, I don't remember that your tape.
I knew that there was always a chance that they could use even a backup announcer. So I shot for both companies just to see what could happen.
Actually, I think Keith Butler was a friend of Charles Robinson, if I remember correctly, and that's how he got that gig.
Yeah, I actually met him at a WWE show through Charles. Charles introduced us.
Right. So, so you start contacting everybody you can. Backtrack real quick. When you heard I got in trouble, be honest. How bad were you hoping I was going to get fired?
I didn't know you, so there was no personal connection.
No offense taken by anything. I'm just curious.
In my head, I'm a college kid, and I want to work for WCW. And if the dude who's announcing right now is going to be on his way out or whatever, cool. It's an open spot.
So you were like before.
How things work now would be a lot different, but yeah, back then as a college kid, yeah.
So when you went to Temple and on Friday night that week, and you said a little prayer that David Penzer would get fired and nothing else bad would happen to him, and he would get it. Hey, I understand. It's a dog eat dog world out there.
I was a hungry college kid that wanted to be a part of either WCW or WWF. So, that's where my mind was. But I was also in school. I couldn't drop out of school. So who knows what I would have even been able to do.
Sure. So I did want to touch on one subject that I didn't know that you did, which is a host for the Tough Man contest around the country. I didn't realize that you had done that. Tell me about how you got that gig and how it helped you in furthering your ring announcing and announcing career.
That was fun. I had so much fun doing Tough Man. They were coming to Tucson, and I saw the local commercial on FX. And as soon as I saw that, I contacted them and tried to track them down to figure out how to get a hold of a real person and introduce myself. And I finally did. And they told me to go down there, and I went down there, showed up in my tux. And before I knew it, Art Dorr, who's the founder of Tough Man, handed me a microphone and told me to get in the ring. Middle of the show, just out of nowhere. And I did it. And I went up there and worked up the crowd and did some introductions and even did some commentating, which is totally different from the wrestling world. And it went well. And they said, hey, we do sometimes three towns in a weekend, and each town's a double shot. They did a tournament deal. And they needed to have another announcer. And they started using me. So I was about 21 years old and traveling to all these towns doing Tough Man, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. There were really no guidelines. Just go out there and do what you do. And it gave me experience working with a live crowd and announcing and introducing the fighters. And, it really gave me, I had a little bit of a wrestling background at the time. And so this gave me some more experience with boxing and just some other stuff, sponsors, and how to talk about sponsors, give them credit.
So if I remember correctly, Tough Man they just came to a town and people signed up and wanted to have real fights with other people in the same town. Is that correct?
Tough Man contest is coming. You want to fight? Sign up here. And
they were totally legit?
Yeah, they're totally legit. They put you in fights with other people in your weight class. And, they'd match you up. And I'd usually be on commentary during the fights. I'd have an arena mic just making up stories like, hey, the guy in the yellow corner got pulled over and got a ticket for something, and the guy in the black corner was the police officer who gave him that ticket. Who do you guys want to win, the yellow or the black? And it was fun.
So that wasn't pre-planned. That was just you coming up with ways to entertain them.
They were all legit. Some of them, they were little bios, so I would use those bios to just kind of give them stories and tell the crowd to build interest. Otherwise, it was guy in yellow versus guy in black over and over. So I would use their bios to tell the people the story of who each guy is and make you somewhat interested in their fight. And then sometimes we'd have women who wanted to fight, and maybe we would have one woman. And then I would go out there and be like, hey, do we have any tough ladies here? Because we only have one lady who wants to fight. Does anybody? And girls would come out from the crowd, do a pregnancy test, and as long as they weren't pregnant, they would fight.
And was there purses for the winners? They get paid, obviously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had remembered Tough Man, peripherally because it was sort of big for a while. But as you found out years later, when you're traveling for a living, you don't get to catch up on a lot of current events. So I never really got the ins and outs on what that really was. So that's really cool. And just out of curiosity, what kind of crowds did they draw? Were they drawing 5,000 people, 10,000, 3,000 on average?
I mean, that was 16 years ago. So if I could just guess, I would say like 3,000 ish, maybe about 3,000 average.
That doesn't stink, actually. So just want to remind everybody we're talking with Justin Roberts, former WWE ring announcer extraordinaire. His book, Best Seat in the House, written totally by him, no ghostwriter, and only took me a weekend to read it. It's a great read, and you could go to justinrobertsbook.com to find out how to order that book, various different ways that you could order. As I said earlier, that my first Kindle download.
It's an honest book, isn't it, David?
It's what?
It's an honest book, isn't it?
No, it's a real honest book. That's why I said you wrote it from the heart. I mean, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's you don't pull any punches, and there's some sensitive things in there that we'll get to in a bit. I'm going to try to speed things up here. So you finally get a tryout with WWE. How did that happen?
I had been making them crazy for years, and right when I graduated,
I think they paid you back.
Right when I graduated college, I reached out and let them know that I had graduated and I was around if they needed anything. And it was that email that triggered a phone call, and they called and said, we're going to bring you in for a tryout, which is all that I'd ever wanted, was just a tryout. I just wanted to be able to show them what I could do. And that was it. So they flew me out, and I did a dark match for Raw and two dark matches for SmackDown. And then it wasn't like storybook, like, oh, they liked me, and then I became the announcer and lived happily ever after. It was, okay, thanks for coming out, and then nothing. And then they brought me out to try me as the commentator, and I had never done wrestling commentary before, and that's really hard, and the guys who do that are really talented, and that wasn't me. I wasn't good at that. So after a while, they brought me out like to fill in for Tony Chimmel and for like a loop. And so I did that, and that became my thing for a while. I was like the backup announcer for SmackDown pretty much.
So let me ask you a question. Going back to this tryout, if your nervous level when you did the two matches for Dave Prazak, it was a 8 or a 7. Tell me your nervous level when you tried out for WWF at the time.
I was sweating. I was definitely sweating. I was really nervous. I don't think it came across. Luckily, I wasn't showing it, but I was definitely nervous.
Yeah. Here's my thing. When, I had been working for WC, just to compare and contrast a little bit about our stories, I was working for WCW, bringing up the enhancement talent and doing stuff behind the scenes. So I got to know a lot of the guys. I got to know a lot of the talent. I was just sort of, running errands and working guerrilla position, making sure the guys were there, telling everybody and anyone who listened that I could ring announce if they had a spot. You weren't working there, but you were basically, like you said, bugging them to death, saying, I can ring announce if you have a spot. So I don't know if this went through your head, but what went through my head is I have a chance now to live my dream that I've been telling everybody that I could do. And if I can't pull it off, I might as well go home and never do it again, never try again. I'm just wondering if you had that same thought in your mind.
My thing was that was all that I wanted to do. I just wanted to be the WWE announcer, and this is my chance to do it. And if they like me, this is going to be awesome. And if they don't, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. Like, I have no idea what else I'm into.
Yeah. So pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same thing. It was put up or shut up at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel your pain. I was there.
Yeah, I mean, you knew what it's like, though, because you got to do it for a long time at WCW and all those huge moments, and you had an awesome career. Yeah, if you went to WWE, it would have been a double hitter. You would have, gotten to do it all over again in a different world. But you got to do the big time deal. You got to be there for Nitro and Goldberg and NWO. Like, you were there for all that. I had done independence and never got to do anything big in wrestling. So this was, and WCW was gone. So this was my one chance to do it.
And yeah, luckily for you, you were good. You could put your money where your mouth is. Luckily for both of us. So one question I wanted to ask you, and I know you sort of answered it in the book later on, but you mentioned that that the one thing that both Lillian and Howard Finkel told you when you did your tryout is don't say his opponent is. I'm wondering what the thought process was behind that. There's a lot of things in your book that, like you said, you're honest to a fault. There's a lot of things that I wonder what the thought process was behind it. But I'm just wondering if you ever found out if that was just one of Vince's isms during that time, or if there was a specific reason why.
That came from Lillian. That was her direction, because that's what had been told to her. She was told at some point not to say his opponent. And then after working there, I realized that that's just like a Vinceism. He comes up with, something will catch his ear one day, something that you've been doing for 5 years, and one day it'll just catch his ear and damn it, I don't like the word opponent. And that's it. Going forward, you get a memo, going forward, do not use the word and his opponent when ring announcing. So it's just like a weird Vinceism, just like the same way he didn't like when you called fans the fans.
Right.
He didn't like referring to fans as the fans. If you ever told him something and you said they, he'd be like, who's they? Like, it's just weird stuff. So that's what it was. It wasn't anything big. It wasn't a huge deal. It was just, you don't say opponent. So that's why the ring announcing was always, the following contest is scheduled for one fall, introducing whatever. And from whatever, here's whatever. So
I was going to ask you what you said. So you just couldn't say, could you say his competitor? I guess that sounds kind of dumb.
No, they would just say, and from whatever, here's whatever. So after a while, I was just like, that's stupid. The opponent is not going to start saying his opponent until I get in trouble. And nobody ever said anything. So to this day, they still say his opponent. It came back, luckily. It's just weird stuff like that went on.
Yeah, we'll get to some of it. And for those who want to see a real honest assessment of what goes on behind the scenes at WWE, WWF back then, when he first started, this book is for you. This is a no holds barred look at what happens, the good and the bad, so to speak. And wrestling's a tough business, and everybody has their quirks, but seem like they put you through the ringer a bit. But we'll get to that a little bit, and we'll leave a lot of that to the book to let people to read. But so you went on a couple of international tours, and I know this has gotten a lot of news lately based on current events of about 30 days ago, 45 days ago. But you had people giving you a hard time. So I know a lot of people know the story, but in a nutshell, tell me a little bit about that and what you went through. Remember, you're 22 at this point, 23?
Right, 22 years old. Wanted nothing more ever than to work there. And then I finally got there and was just, happy and proud and excited to be there. I worked really, really hard to get there. And then when I got there, I realized it's not a friendly place to newcomers, especially young announcers who don't take bumps, who are coming in. And there were people who just wanted to make my life hell. So they did. And, that came up, of course, in the news when there was speculation about other people's situations. And they said, well, in Justin's book, he talks about this, this, and this. So, yeah, I tell my full story, the good, the bad. And some of the stuff that came up was stuff that people learned about some of these characters and said, well, this happened and this happened according to Justin's book. And, no one disputed that because there were a lot of guys around for all that. So everybody knew that everything I put in was true. But then, how it tied in with the current events, and that was just speculation. But I didn't bring that up in hopes of, going after anybody.
No, you couldn't have known. You couldn't have known what was going to happen. You were just telling your story, and it just was it just seemed to the same time that your book was coming out, something that sort of touched the nerve of what you wrote about happened. So, and so hey, but let me ask you a question, because as somebody who's been on plenty of ribs before, I don't know if they were as cool as some of the ones that you went to, but I've been on the other end of a lot of ribs, being in the wrestling business. I tried to put myself in your shoes in some of those ribs. So I know on one of the international tours, you were sitting in the front of the bus, and some of the guys gave you a hard time because you should have sat in the back of the bus. Then you sat in the back of the bus, and they were giving you a hard time because you sat in the front. You should have sat in the front of the bus. What would have happened? And I'm sure this probably went through your mind, if you would have gone up to those people the next day on the tour and say, I know I'm just a ring announcer and you're a veteran and I want to show you respect. Where would you like me to sit? Do you think that would have helped, or do you think they just would have found more ways to make your life miserable?
I tried everything to have it end, to just be done with getting messed with. And, I went along with everything. If I knew then what I know now about how the company is, like, Vince would have loved me if I stood up to them and just, told them to whatever. But when you're a 22-year-old who worked their butt off to get there and didn't want to make any waves and didn't want to do anything to upset anyone, I didn't realize back then that the higher ups would have loved that if I stood up to them. I thought if I stood up to them, I could get fired. There was no way out, even if I approached them and asked them about what I could do. I mean, I would, off the record, ask guys, what should I do? Just don't sell it. Just don't sell. That's really all they would tell me, is just don't sell it. So I don't know. I feel like I tried everything, but nothing worked.
But eventually it did pass, and the new crew came in, and you were able to survive that. I often think, and I've thought this a lot over my time in the wrestling business, at least back in WCW. I often think that in the world of professional wrestling, the ones who get the farthest are the ones who don't give a shit. Pardon my French.
Yep.
I think that both of our problems is we cared too much, and
if I didn't care, I would have a job there for life.
Exactly, because
I would have a job for life if I didn't care.
Eric was very similar, I think, in some ways to as a boss to Vince was. I know that they're a lot different, but in some ways, I think they both respected people who had egos and didn't respect people who didn't have egos. And I think when you're, correct me if I'm wrong, and you could chime in, but I think that when you're a ring announcer who's living their dream and don't want to screw that up, it's hard to have an ego around your boss. You want to show respect, but they don't see that as a sign of respect. They see that as a sign of weakness. Is that the same as it was with Vince?
I agree. 100%.
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't have given a but that just wasn't in my DNA, and I don't think it was in your DNA.
I look back and say, should I? But I couldn't have lived like that. That just wasn't me.
Okay, and so I will have a question for you. I told you I didn't write very many questions, just some topics, but I want to ask you a question. What is the answer to this question, and why? Biggest thrill or bigger thrill, announcing your first WrestleMania or announcing for the first time at Madison Square Garden?
First WrestleMania. Madison Square Garden isn't something that I grew up as a kid thinking, wow, Madison Square Garden. I didn't learn about that Madison Square Garden was a special place until later on. To me, Rosemont Horizon was Madison Square Garden. In Chicago, that was the arena where I grew up watching all the wrestling and concerts. And so that place was on Madison Square Garden. So yeah, announcing WrestleMania was for sure a huge deal for me. And as you learn from the book, there was like a lot of drama with that. And when I actually got to announce my first WrestleMania match, I didn't know if it was actually going to happen. So I couldn't really be excited about it until it was actually happening.
Yeah, that was another question I had. Were you not in the production meetings?
I was in the production meeting that morning, looking through the script, and that's when I noticed that Howard's name was in there.
But you did get to go to the production meetings. It wasn't clear from the book. You were. Okay.
We did production meetings. Ring announcers were in production meetings up until a certain point, and then we weren't there anymore. For a number of years we were there, and then we were told, only these people need to be there today, and then just from then on we didn't have to go to production meetings anymore, which was good because those were awful. Those were really uncomfortable.
What was awful about the production meetings in WWE?
It's really uncomfortable. Like the lead writer would be up there with like Kevin and Vince, and then everybody would just like the agents and whoever else would be sitting there. Like sometimes you'd have like a Shawn Michaels or someone like that in the room. And then you just go through it. Like the head writer would read through the show, and then they would ask for like comments or suggestions, but they didn't really want comments or suggestions. So you just went and kept your mouth shut and hoped that nobody called on you to say anything. But for that WrestleMania one, that's when I was supposed to be announcing, and in LA. But then when I got the script in the meeting, that's when my name was nowhere to be found. And then Kevin Dunn came into the room and called me out and told me what he told me. And that was that. That was LA.
So you didn't end up doing, I'm getting confused now and I apologize. You didn't get
so I did not doing LA as promised. And then I didn't end up doing Chicago the next year as promised. And then my debut was the year after that in Detroit, WrestleMania 23.
And that was probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but up until that time, the biggest thrill in your career, pretty much, I'm guessing?
That was amazing. That was probably the biggest thing I had done. I mean, working Rosemont Horizon in Allstate Arena, that was like the biggest thrill. And then announcing WrestleMania 23 was next up there. That was big.
And the reason I asked the question about biggest thrill, Madison Square Garden or WrestleMania, is because those are the only two things I regret not being able to do in my career. So I wanted to get your take on which was more important. And I do understand that to you, Madison Square Garden wasn't as big a deal as it was to probably the generation before you, or people who are a little bit older who watched.
After I did it, I mean, right, even before I did it, like I was looking forward to it. I knew it was a big deal. It just wasn't something that was instilled in me at a young age. Like Madison Square Garden is, the Mecca. It's the world's most famous arena. I didn't know that until I was part of the company, and then I learned about like the mystique and just how cool of a place it was. And then once I actually did it, that was really neat. And I thought, wow, I don't know, was I 24, I think, working Madison Square Garden for the first time, and that was neat. It was definitely neat.
I can only imagine. So we get past some of the bullying, and you get a new crew in there, and I'm assuming you're working house shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday, TV Monday and Tuesday, and you get home for a day or two. Does that sound right?
I was filling in. Let's see. I was filling in for a while, and then in 2004, I went full time, and I was doing the Raw tour. So I was doing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday I would do Sunday Night Heat, come home Tuesday. Then when I moved to ECW, I was doing. I think I was still doing at one point I was doing the Raw house shows on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then doing like ECW on Tuesday. So, and then I'd come home Wednesday and Thursday and then go back out again.
It all starts to blend together, huh?
Yeah. I mean, obviously when I was writing the book, I made notes of everything and looked at my schedule, but off the top of my head now here in Santa Clara. I don't know.
Sure. So, because the one thing that both of us had in common, other than the fact that we were ring announcers and grew up loving the business and lived our dreams, was that it seemed like neither of us ever took time off. And I worked every single Nitro, every single Thunder, every other week we did Saturday night, every house show until the very end when the Keith Butler jumped aboard for about a year, and I just took one weekend off. I had 2 young kids and a family, and I was just I also worked in the office back then. I was doing talent relations, and so you can imagine I was on the days that I was home, I was going to the office. So it wasn't even like I had those days off. So it's crazy. So I thought that we'd see, the similarities and the differences of our schedule.
I didn't time off. You just knew that it wasn't encouraged, and it's almost like frowned upon when you did it. And I went a real long time without taking any time off because I didn't want to upset anyone, and I didn't want to lose my spot.
Well, my theory always was, and tell me if you thought the same thing. My theory always was, I know I do a good job, but somebody in charge might have a cousin who wants to be a ring announcer, and I give them an opportunity, and then they use that opportunity to get their cousin in the door, and that's the end of me. So if there was no opportunity because I was there every night, then I couldn't lose my gig. Any similarities in your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, of course you think that way. But at the same time, like after a number of years, when I asked for a weekend off, I just remember thinking like the office is gonna say like, you work hard, you deserve this. You've been on 5-6 days a week straight for all these years, and they'll be like, hey, enjoy your weekend off, enjoy your 3 days off, and they never did. I never got that.
Yeah, and that's sort of where your journey takes a different turn than mine did. But we'll get to that in a second. I wanted to ask you if you were comfortable discussing. You talk about it in the book, and I was very close to the situation in a different way. But if you're comfortable discussing the night after that, the Chris Benoit situation went down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but Chris was a good friend. I traveled with him. He lived in the same city as I did. Steve Regal, Fit Finley, I know 2 people that are very important to you, and a couple other guys. And we would socialize on our when we had time off with our families, and Chris and Nancy and the Grunge lived in the same city too, Peachtree City in Atlanta. So I saw a lot of things that he hid from the guys. Did you ever see anything when Chris was on the road towards the end that made you think that he was starting to maybe lose it a little bit? I know that you can never have foreseen what you did. I didn't either, but just that maybe he was starting to cave.
I mean, I always knew that he had 2 sides. I always knew that other side of him from the stuff that happened that I talk about, stuff that happened at restaurants, even domestically when he was drinking, and, who knows what else he was doing. So I saw that savage side of him. I had dinner the other night with Bret Hart, and we were talking about that, and like Bret had never seen that side of him. So some people did, some people didn't, but I knew that other side. It was pretty scary.
Yeah. It's funny because
I talk about.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I talk about like, even like the stuff that he put me through, that was just some of it, but most of it, like, we were always very cordial, and he was very good to my family, which I talk about and tell stories in there. So it was weird. Everything about it was weird, and obviously very sad and awful.
It's fun. It's funny. None of it's funny, quite frankly, but it's ironic looking back because some of the people that were closest to him never saw it. Because I remember you're talking about talking to Bret Hart, that he never saw anything like that, and you did. I remember when this all went down, I was on the phone for hours with Chris Jericho, who was much closer to Chris Benoit than I was, and I was pretty close to him and his family. And he had never seen that. He was shocked, and I was telling him the stories about how they would both, Chris and Nancy would both go to Johnny Grunge and tell their, they'd have a fight. They'd each tell their side of the story. Johnny Grunge, to me, I think was the only person that they didn't feel that judged them, because Johnny Grunge was kind of a screw up, in a nice way, nicest guy in the world, but kind of a screw up. So I don't think that they felt like they judged him, but I think that Chris felt like anybody else, whether it was Brett or Chris Jericho or any of those guys, would judge him. So I think he hid it from his closest friends. And
the thing with Brett said that he was always very respectful of him, and I could totally picture what I think it would look like if Chris and Brett were hanging out, and I think that's part of it. Chris really respected Brett, and like he wouldn't do that in front of Brett. He wouldn't do that in front of Jericho. I could see that.
Now, you heard the news. You already were suspicious, I assume, that he didn't show up, because we both know that Chris Benoit doesn't miss shows. But you heard the news. Tell me about how that was when Vince called you guys in that day at TV.
Vince was going to be addressing us later in the day. We had been in Corpus Christi at the arena all day, and there, of course, was a brand split at the time, and both brands were there, so everybody was there, and a lot of talent had come back. Like, they were going to have a lot of cameos. It was going to be Vince's funeral. So there were going to be a lot of cameos on the show. So there's a lot of talent there that day. And towards the end of the day, when we were going to be getting ready to do the show, that's when we got called into the arena, and Vince got a mic and went in the ring and addressed us. And before he started talking, I saw some whispering, and after the whispering, people would, their faces would drop or their hands would cover their face, and I knew we weren't getting good news. And when he presented us with the information, it came off as if, to me at least, it came off as if police went there and found the three of them dead. So we, assumed that the three of them were murdered.
So that you didn't have any thought going through your mind that something wacko happened inside that house?
No, when it was presented that the police went over there and the three of them had been murdered, that to me was somebody murdered them.
Yes,
and that's what it was.
It's interesting because I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'm sitting in my house right now, and I was taking a nap. My son, who's now 22 years old, woke me up and said, "Chris and Nancy and Daniel are dead." And you first wake up, you're kind of groggy, and I wasn't sure what I heard, and no matter what went through my head, I knew that that whatever happened was nobody but two people in that house ending up with three people dead. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. And I don't know if you remember this, but they were doing the tribute, and everybody was talking about Chris being such a great guy. And I don't know if you remember this, but William Regal, who was part of our little group, was the only one who said, "I don't want to talk about Chris the man. I want to talk about what a great wrestler he was." And I remember thinking to myself, "Yep, he knows it too." And this was before the news broke. Did you listen to Regal, and did that mean anything to you, or that just flew over your head because you're traveling and you're just trying to process bad news? Just wondering, as somebody who lived through it, if that raised any suspicion.
I know people started talking. There was chatter that evening. Before the tribute show started and during the tribute show, and that's when the chatter was really started. And then it was, by the next morning, we knew what really happened. So, yeah, I remember Regal. I definitely remember that because I wondered what he was going to say because I knew he was close. And, yeah, it's awful.
Well, absolutely awful, and it's hard to talk about even 10 plus years later, and no excuse, and in my mind, and just a horrible chapter in all of our lives that we just have to move past. And I appreciate you talking about it, because for a lot of us, it's hard to talk about. It was as big of a tragedy, probably other than Owen, maybe as there was in this business. So let's get back to your story, because I know that I've had you on the phone for a while, and I want to let you enjoy Santa Clara before the Tool concert tomorrow. So It seems to me that you were enjoying the house shows a lot more than TV. Would that be correct?
Love the house shows. Hated TVs.
Without giving away everything in the book, could you give us a little example of why the house shows were so much fun and TV was not exactly a bowl of cherries?
Yeah, there was politics at TV, and house shows were just fun. And I talked quite a bit about our friend Fit Finley. And,
that was the next subject I was going to bring up. You read my mind. So go ahead, because I was going to tease.
The stuff we did at house shows was just ridiculous, and it was nothing that took away from what the fans got for a show. The fans always got a good show, but we had fun. We had a lot of fun. We had too much fun, and we just did stupid stuff to amuse ourselves, and it was just fun. House shows were really fun. I would usually come in and meet with it. Back then it was like 2 producers. That changed over time, and then it went back to 2, but there'd be 2 producers, between Arn and Dean and Fit, Ricky Steamboat, Mike Rotunda, Ed DiBiase. So we'd get in, and I would sit down with 1 or 2 of the agents, and then the production manager, who would sit there and control the music, and we would go over the show, and it was easy. And if I ever had an idea, I'd throw it out. I was comfortable throwing out an idea to those guys because I worked with them every weekend, and they had brilliant minds. And if they liked an idea, they'd go with it. If they didn't, they would tell me why they didn't like it, and I learned from it. And I really got a great education. But the 3 of us, sometimes 4 of us, would put it together and go out there and do it. And then we'd say, hey, maybe tomorrow, what if we hit the music here because this felt funny, and what if we did this? And it was fun. Like, that was fun to us. What if we do this? What if we do that? Like, just being creative. And it's usually really minor changes. But to us, that goes a long way. The wrestling's about the little things. You're on the psychological roller coaster, and you want to put together a show that takes the crowd on that accurate journey. And it was fun sitting together and putting together the show. And sometimes I'd be at ringside. Maybe Steve Kern would be sitting at ringside, and we would just sit there and like talk about something going on in the ring or in the arena. And it was just fun. We were hanging out. Sometimes Fit Finley would go in, and he would be the producer, but at the same time, he would be leading a new talent who was on the road for the first weekend in a match. So, he's the boss, but then he's also wrestling this match. And then, like I talk about in the book, we would play stupid games. I would throw him an imaginary baseball, and while he's in the middle of the ring wrestling, he would be swinging an imaginary bat at my imaginary baseball. And
I love that stuff.
It was just fun.
And that's
go out there and have good matches.
That's the kind of stuff you had to do to keep yourself sane when you're traveling that long.
Yeah.
You're doing that kind of stuff. I love that story about Fit.
Fun.
Yeah. One of the classiest guys in the business, I think we could both agree, and a great family and great person, Fit Finley. I know that we've discussed that before. So I know that
humor is so funny.
I know that we've discussed before, and one of the things I noticed that was different to me, because in WCW I was encouraged, as Gary Capetto was before me, to engage with the fans during the commercial breaks and before the show. And WWE was always much more structured, if I recall.
So that was the thing at house shows. I could talk to the crowd and have fun with them.
So that was my question. You can engage. You were able to engage with the crowd. You weren't just pitching the videos.
I was doing my independent spiel that I did in the independent. Like, you guys having a good time and things like that. And they're like, this isn't a carnival. We don't do that here. So I stopped doing that at house shows. And then later on, I brought it back a little bit. But at TVs, you couldn't talk during matches because they might be shooting something backstage. It was like they didn't want you doing anything with the crowd. They didn't want you getting over with the crowd. They didn't want you popping the crowd, which you and I talked about in Florida. So it was really weird because you couldn't go out there and do a great job. At house shows, you could, for the most part, depending who's around. Sometimes some of the bosses would be there, and then you don't do that. But it's weird. It's like, go out there and don't have fun. Okay.
Well, that's sort of the irony of this whole story is you living your dream job. All of a sudden, you're I don't want to put words in your mouth, but all of a sudden you're it's not your dream job anymore. Tell us a little bit how that happened and how you were able to handle with it. Because you stayed on the road a long time. It seems to me after you stopped having as much fun as you were having at the beginning.
Yeah, house shows started getting overproduced, and they became more complicated, and they weren't fun anymore. And it became a battle every weekend showing up. And basically, Michael Hayes took over the booking of the house shows from John Laurinaitis. Like Johnny would, if I ever gave him feedback, he would want to know more. Tell me more about this, tell me more about that. And sometimes like he'd call me the next day and be like, "How is this?" or "How is that?" He wanted feedback, and I loved that. I thought that was cool because he's writing the shows and he's not there, so he doesn't know certain things. So I'm just giving him some feedback. When Michael Hayes took over, it was basically like copy and paste. He would have this idea of what he wanted to do and use it. And then the next weekend, he'd use it again. And the next week, he'd use it again. Even if we got to a show on a Friday and something just didn't work and it was really weird. And so they would make a change for Saturday and then it would be better on Saturday. But then when we came to the next loop the next week and there were different producers running it, it was like, here we go again. And that's where I had to like speak up, but I'm a ring announcer. I'm not in a position to speak up. So I'd be like, "Hey, just so you know, the producers that I was with last week, we did the show Friday and it was strange here. So we changed this for Saturday, but he didn't make the change in the script for this week. It's still the same as it was last Friday." And it just became like having to fight for all these little things that the three of us used to sit down and put a show together that made sense, that was comfortable, that everybody was into. And then it just became politicking every single weekend and having to fight for trying to help them put on a good show.
Were the house shows scripted always from the first time you got there? When I say scripted, when we did house shows, there was 7 matches, and they'd say, "Okay, do this match first, this match second, this match third, do an intermission, boom, 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 plug merch, plug the sponsors, plug, and that was it. It wasn't produced at all."
That's how it used to be. They used to write it out, and I could still picture Fitz writing his handwriting, and I could picture Arn's handwriting.
Oh God!
And they would put the card up, and that was it. And then it became like actual scripts.
And when was that? When was that, if you remember?
I don't know, like post 2007, 8, 9.
Okay.
Sometime around then.
I know it all tends to blend together, so I'm just curious because I
mean, I would know. I saved all the scripts, so I have when it started. Like I saved all of my scripts that some people collect hotel keys. I saved the scripts.
No matches, box of matches. You don't save
What's that?
You don't save matches, huh?
Different era, brother.
Yeah, I know. I'm showing my age. Yeah, but because I tried to picture myself if I had to do the script thing, and I mean, I would have done it obviously, but it seems to me highly overproduced for. I understand television, surely, but it seems to me highly overproduced for a house show, and I could see that getting ponderous, for lack of a better word. But
very overproduced.
And then at TV, tell me a couple of quick stories about things that happened at TV that just got you down without going too far into what's in the book.
It was just boring. It was just boring. It was just very repetitive, and I don't know. Sometimes we had cool angles, but it just I don't know. It wasn't like when they had the competition of Nitro and they needed to put out a good show each week. It was just they're going to put out the show they wanted to put out, and that was it. So we had good shows, obviously, but we had a lot of bad shows too. So,
but personally, for you, why was TV so frustrating?
So, a lot of politics at TV, and you had people like you're on the road every single day, and then you'd have people who came on the road and showed up to just TVs, and they talk down to you as if they know what they're doing, and you don't. You're a ring announcer. What do you know? Whereas you're the one who's at the shows every week, every day, and you just get talked down to by a lot of the office people, and it's annoying. I didn't have an IFB. I didn't have any communication with my bosses. A lot of times most times scripts weren't out until right before the show started or as the show went along. They didn't know what they wanted. So you're out there with no IFB, no communication with the bosses to get direct cues. You're getting cued through other people. And there were a lot of times where I didn't know what was going on. And it was just real uncomfortable. I was very nervous on Monday nights doing live TV because I never knew what was going on. And nobody ever would tell me because they didn't really know. And if they didn't know, I was the last one to find out.
Didn't seem like it was a position that was valued for somebody who's in the ring controlling the whole show for the live audience. It doesn't seem like the powers that be, so to speak, valued that position at a high level.
They did. Their theory was anybody can do it. Anybody can do it.
And you were told that, basically, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, flat out. I was flat out told that. Anybody can do it. So
that's unbelievable to me.
They made it very clear anybody could do it, and that was their take. So when I used to ask questions, because I wanted the presentation to be what they had in mind when they wrote it. Hey, when I do this, do you want me to say this, or do you want me to do that? I wanted to execute it the way that they had it in their head. Do I know that this is going to be a match? Is it something that turns into a match? I would ask little questions, and they just didn't want to be bothered with it.
See,
I'd say something, Triple H, and I'd bring up something like, hey, whatever, and then this is happening, and he'd just make a comment, like make a snide remark, and tell me I was stupid, and then he'd go and walk away from me and fix whatever I just brought up.
Gotta love that. Yet it seems like if you said the wrong thing, even though you weren't told what to say, you got chewed out. So it was like a no-win situation.
You couldn't win.
That's amazing.
You couldn't win. There were times, like I tell a story in there about the Payback announcement, like a minute-long announcement, and I questioned something, and Johnny said, this came direct from Vince, just do it as is. So I did it word for word, memorized it, and did it word for word. Mark Yaten, timekeeper, read along as I announced it. He goes, perfect. And then he looks up at his headphones, and they're talking to him, and wipes the sweat off of them and hands them to me and puts them on. And that's where I know I'm getting chewed out. And, they chewed me out for saying something that I said in there. And I just took a picture of the script and I sent it to Vince and Kevin. And I emailed it and I said, this is what I was told to say. And, supposedly it came from Vince. That's why I said it. And then the next day I got called into the truck. And that's when Kevin told me never to email Vince again, and that he is the chairman of a publicly traded company, and I'm just a ring announcer.
So there was no win for losing. One thing about the IFB, because I know you were very frustrated that you never had one. We've talked about this in the past. The one thing that's positive about for you, I know there's a lot of negative not having an IFB. For people who don't know, an IFB is you put a little wire earpiece in your ear, and the truck talks to you, or different people could talk to you. And we've talked about when Nitro was similar to what you're talking about Raw, and they were literally getting the show segment by segment while it was live on the air. The truck was literally getting the show segment by segment. Keith Mitchell, who was our producer, would tell me in my ear who to announce. And, apparently you didn't have that same luxury. So you were kind of guessing on the fly half the time, correct?
I'm sorry, you had cut out for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. So what I was saying is when I had an IFB, when we were doing Nitro, and they were literally getting the segments, 5 minutes before they were on live television, I would get Keith Mitchell, who was our executive producer, would tell me in my ear in my IFB who to announce. And apparently you weren't getting that same type of information. You were kind of trying to guess, correct?
Yeah, the first time we did Superstars on WGN, I had the match ready to start, and show starts, lights go out, gong, the Undertaker's coming out. And I looked at the referee, I go, why is the Undertaker coming out? And he goes, the match changed. It's now Undertaker versus Matt Hardy. Like, okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So they just never told me. So when they used to bring in girls, again, the whole idea was anybody could do this. They used to bring in these girls to try them out as ring announcers. And I used to go through with them. And not only was I teaching them the following contest is scheduled for one fall, winner by submission, by disqualification, by countout, just basic stuff that wrestling fans know, but these girls who were coming in just didn't have any idea. I would walk around the arena with them and quiz them on who the guys were and give them a program and be like, learn their faces, because there's going to be times where you go out there to announce a match, and if it changes on the fly, nobody tells you, it's going to be pretty embarrassing if you call the wrong person out. And that was part of the learning process, walking around going, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is that guy?
Yeah, that's important stuff, and it amazes me that nobody took it more seriously other than it seems you. Well, I did want to tell you the positive thing about not having an IFB, and recently I did some Impact tapings and worked with Keith Mitchell again, who was my producer from WCW and later TNA and now Impact Wrestling.
I just met for the first time, I think in November. I did a boxing show with him and Jim Ross and Al Bernstein, Sean Wheelock, and Keith Mitchell was going to be directing and producing, I think. And I said, man, I've heard your name for years. It's cool to actually meet you. And I instantly took a liking to him. Like literally within the first minute of meeting him, there was an issue that I had with what they were doing on the show. And we were both on the same page because we had that wrestling mentality, and instantly took a liking to him.
Oh, great guy. Love Keith. I hope to have a multi-part interview on this podcast with Keith Mitchell. People don't know the name very well, but he just as a quick background, he was very influential in making world-class wrestling into the top produced syndicated show in the world back when wrestling was syndicated, and then was with WCW from the very beginning all the way to the end, and was been through with TNA from the very beginning all the way until now, the change to Impact and the change of ownership and management. So I say about doing this podcast, often the people that have stories to tell, you may not know their name and you may not know their position, but they often have some of the best stories to tell because they're right there in the truck listening to everything go down for 20 years. So
Absolutely.
A little tease. You still there, buddy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I will tell you the positive thing about not having an IFB and being given headsets, though. If you screw up or you're perceived to screw up and you have an IFB, you get yelled at and you can't say anything back. You just got to take it. Even if you're right, you can't say.
Yeah, but when you work at WWE and you don't have an earpiece and they give you the headset to get yelled at, you can't say anything back.
Well, that's a whole different story. You just get heat.
Right.
But Keith, it was an ongoing joke with me and Keith Mitchell being on the headset about he would always say, David, nod if you could hear me, and then we did this WCW, and we did this in TNA, and we did this last month in Impact, and he would say, nod, David, nod if you could hear me, nod, and he would take his hand off the button and he would say, if you're an asshole. And everybody else in the truck and everybody else on headset could hear, but I couldn't hear. But I knew what he was saying because we've been playing this dance for 25 years, and it's fun game to play. But it's also frustrating sometimes when in the heat of the battle they would say to you, you did this wrong, and you can't say anything till you're at the bar later on at night, So there's our positives and negatives, but I do feel your pain in reading your book and hearing your stories. I want to end on something that sort of started.
I was going to say this is actually something that's cool that my buddy Scott Dunlap had sent me. There's a link on YouTube to some Nitro clips like from the truck, and it's basically Tony Schiavone, and I think you get on there a couple times, but it's before Nitro went on the air, and it's neat to hear like the inside of that. Before they went up there.
There's about 30 of those. They came from, you remember back in the day, there was the big old satellites you put in the back of your backyard?
Yeah.
And so you could get like the actual live stream that TNT would send, and they would send that stream to TNT from wherever we were just to make sure the audios are right and to make sure everything was right. And if you look around on YouTube, there's about 20 or 30 of those from Nitro and Thunder where you could hear me, the announcers messing with me, and you could hear me doing my spiel and introducing the Nitro girls and Wildcat Willie and the truck going back and forth. It's kind of fun behind the scenes stuff.
I like that.
Yeah, so you could look for that. I don't know. Maybe I'll find a link and we could let the fans know that are listening to the podcast. But it's kind of interesting. It was fun.
Look how high tech you're becoming.
Yeah,
I'm very impressed, David.
Thank you. I'm trying my best.
Very high tech. You got your own podcast. You're going to be linking to YouTube.
Yeah. God bless my kids, 20 and 22 years old. They helped me. They had to help me set up my new cell phone the other day. But we digress.
You know what we didn't talk about, which I don't think I talked about in the book, and I don't think you and I have ever. Maybe I did bring it up a while back. I was friends with Mike Lima in Chicago, and when you guys were starting the XWF, I didn't know that you were involved early on, and I'd been sending out my videotape, and they once had me call. I called the XWF office, and I think you were in there. And I talked to one of the nasties at probably Knobs, and he put it on speaker and had me announce for you guys. Do you ever remember that?
I don't remember that. Were we ribbing you, or were we serious?
Yeah, of course. Or ribbing you. Ribbing both of us.
They're ribbing both of us. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't remember that. Mike was a great guy who left too soon and left us too soon, and a lot of that, unfortunately, was due to the stress that the XWF brought him, which was such a shame because what started out to be such a cool idea. And if you go back and you look at some of those episodic tapes that we did, it actually holds up pretty well, I think, considering that it's been 20-something years ago. But yeah, Mike was a common friend and a great guy, and I don't remember that. But I can only imagine that they were ribbing both of us, that they were telling me how great you were, and they were telling you how great you were, so that you thought you were going to get my job. But I was luckily I was in the office. I was head of talent relations, and I was set in with the booking committee, and I wrote the TV scripts, and I did everything. So by that time, I was pretty secure in my job. If I had known you were lurking around WCW talking to Jackie Crockett, I probably would have gotten nervous. But I think I was cool. But I want to wrap this up because you've been great with your time, and I know that you got book signing tomorrow and a concert event tomorrow. So I want to wrap this up. But it seems like something that should have been and is, I think, that one of the things you're most proud of accomplishing sort of was the beginning of the end of living your dream. And it's sort of ironic, and it sort of shows the what you were putting up with in the company you work for. So talk to me about Connor and how you got to meet him and how you got to make his dreams come true.
Met Connor at the Royal Rumble, and it was just a weird day. I talk about why it was a weird day and just kind of a somber day. And met him as I was leaving the arena, walking towards the back. And there was just something special about him. And I knew that he didn't have a lot of time. His dad made it very clear when I first started talking to him. And, I like to help whenever I can. And I wanted to help. And, I used my position to basically introduce him to all of his heroes. And he had met Daniel Bryan previously. That was his favorite. And I had asked, I said, is Daniel your favorite? And, is that your one favorite? He's like, well, I like everybody. So I just introduced him to a lot of the guys and girls over time. And in a position where I felt like it was a waste that I was there, and just, I don't know. It was helpful going to work and knowing that I was in a position where I could still do things for other people and things that meant a lot for other people. And that was it. I just wanted to help. And he got to do some incredible things, because of those guys and girls. And form friendships with his heroes. So, that was where in a position that might not really matter. It mattered because I was in a spot where I could help other people. And, it was rough. Just very sad seeing, a little boy, losing his life at 8 years of age. So, that was, just a hard thing to go through. And, I wish there's a part of me that hoped that, maybe there would be a miracle just because of all the good stuff that was going on around him. Maybe that could somehow do what medicine couldn't do, and who knew? Maybe there would be a miracle and things would go a different way. So,
and not that it matters, but it sort of does, kind of does, and it kind of doesn't, because at the end of the day, it's a horrible story, and there's so many like those, and you were able to make a difference in a lot of kids' lives. I know. And I know that that's something that you took pride in, and for good reason. But you were, as opposed to what the story that was being told for whatever PR reasons or whatever reasons, you were a lot more involved than most would have you believe in making his dreams come true. Correct?
That's. It's weird, because then you talk about this and it's like people are like, oh, he wants credit, and I don't want credit. So in saying like, yeah, I was the one who's behind the story and making the FaceTime calls with the guys each week and bring him to that show where he came in early and all that. Like, if I talk about that, then it's like,
I understand your situation.
Yeah,
but
weird.
But it's almost to me like, though, that it'd be nice if someone acknowledged. Nobody needs a medal. You don't need any money. You don't need a vacation. You don't need a pat on the back. Even just a little bit of acknowledge it. Hey, thanks for bringing him into our world. And
not even that. I don't even need a thanks. Just if they told the actual story versus which their story wasn't far off. It's just, it's a complicated thing.
Well, obviously, and I know that you were very close to him.
I wrote that blog. I kept it to myself for a long time, but then I wrote that blog when Stephanie's tweet came out because I saw what they were doing, and not to get into the whole thing, but that idea to do the Warrior Award to give to employees who work really hard behind the scenes for years. And I thought that was really cool, and as did a lot of people that work there. But the blog kind of showed the contrast between how the company really treats people, because the Warrior Award would be like for employees that are, that give their lives to the company. And instead of going that route, they switched it into something that would bring them media attention. And the way they actually treated the employees, they fired Mark Yaton on the eve of his 30th anniversary. So it's like, hey, we're such a good company. Look what we did. Look what we did with this little boy. Aren't we great? Because they were showing that video before there was Connor's Cure. They just showed the video to say, look how great we are. So it was like all this stuff going on at once. And then when Steph put out that tweet about philanthropy being the new form of marketing and how companies are going to get ahead, it's just, that's why I wrote the blog and said what I said. And then, of course, I just talk about the story and why, and, why I felt the need to write it and what I was getting at. And it was just about how the company wants to be seen one way and do these things for the publicity and show, how great and caring of an organization they are, but then at the same time, how they really treat people behind the scenes and the people who aren't going to bring them that media attention.
And that's the point I was getting to, not who gets credit for what or anything like that, but the point I was trying to get to was, are there double standards in, what's a a huge publicly traded company and the biggest professional wrestling and sports entertainment company in the business. And I think that anybody that reads your book, and I, again, certainly if you haven't read Best Seat in the House by Justin, go out and get it. You can download it on Kindle. It was really easy. But yeah, there's some stuff that goes on at the corporate level that makes you wonder, which side do they really stand on as far as bullying, anti-bullying, and treating employees versus not treating their employees, and it's just an interesting, honest, from the heart book that I really enjoyed. So it kind of ended one day, and were you relieved? Were you upset? Were you all of the above?
No, not at all. It was just relief. As crazy as that sounds, and I wouldn't have believed myself if current self told past self that was going to be the feeling. But that's what it was. It was relief. I was done with the politics. I was done with the travel. The last 2-3 years there were just, I wasn't happy. And so when they said they weren't renewing my contract, it was just a big relief. I knew what the upcoming schedule was, and once they told me that I was done, I was just like, cool. I don't have to stress about any of that anymore. I don't have to stress about heat. I don't have to be somewhere every single week and not be able to plan ahead and go do something that I want to do. I was living for work, and it was just a big relief. And I was glad that I was able to do everything that I did. And I'm very happy with everything that I did. I had an awesome career. I got to work with all of these great heroes that I grew up watching. I got to work the events, Saturday night's main event, Monday Night Raw, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, Wrestlemania, Survivor Series. I was able to work all over the world. So everything I did was awesome. It was really cool. I had a great career, and I'm very happy with everything I was able to do. And that was it. I'm okay with being done because I got to do everything.
So you're done with living your dream, and so they say sometimes be careful about what you dream for, because sometimes it's not all it's cut up to be. But I hope that I know that after I left WCW, there was a lot of bad feelings because of how it ended and all the craziness that went down, but I find over time, and I don't know if there's been enough time for you, but I find over time you forget a lot of the bad stuff, and you just remember the good times. Has that happened to you yet? I'm hoping.
I remember both. I remember the bad times, but overall, I remember the good times and what I was able to accomplish. So I'm very honest. I'm a very honest person. I'm very honest with myself. And, I think about the good and the bad. It's the bad that keeps me from having the feeling of like, oh, I want to go back. I've never had that feeling since I've left. I've never had that because of the bad. But all of the good, it's easy to look back and say, that was awesome. This is really cool. I got to do this. Or if I see an old clip, people tweet me clips all the time. And it's awesome. You have a lot of really good memories, but it's the bad ones that keep you from getting that urge to want to go back and take more abuse.
I'm hoping over time that has happened with me, that the bad will sort of fade away a little bit more and the good will protrude a little bit more. And so I hope that for you. Let me ask you a question, Justin. Just assume that a kid, a young Justin Roberts, is listening to this podcast now, who loves the business, loves the larger-than-life characters, loves everything that happens, and doesn't think they could be a wrestler, and wants to try to get in the business. What would you tell him?
I tell them not to be discouraged from anything that I talk about in my story. And by what I talk about in my story, I hope that it changes things for the better for the people who are there now and the people who will be there in the future, and to absolutely follow their dreams. I didn't know anybody in the business. I started from the very bottom, from scratch, and I made it happen. And follow your dreams. And if you love wrestling, then you should 100% go for it, and you should not give up until you get there, and that anything is possible.
And you look at life that way, not only professional wrestling. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, meeting somebody that you want to meet. You know, a comedian, your favorite comedian, or you know, getting backstage at a show, or you know, you live your life that way to never give up and try any different amount of ways to get to the end game, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And that's something that, out of all the things I took away from your book, I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from your book, is that you should never give up. And look, even an old 51-year-old guy like me could learn something. And so next time somebody comes to town that I want to meet, I'm going to look how you did it, and I'm going to figure out a way to get backstage at a rock and roll concert or a comedy concert. I'm going to use the Justin Roberts
the Justin Roberts approach.
Yes, the Justin Roberts approach. I think you should start a school where you could teach people how to, you know, live their dreams and how to do what they want to do and set their mind to it. You've lived. I like to tell people I live my dream. The rest is gravy. But you got to keep living and you got to keep doing stuff. So what does the future hold for Justin Roberts? I know you're on tour now with Tool, and I know you've done some you know, some fan events and some stuff with Tommy Dreamer. But anything that what's the next thing? Do you even know the next thing that you're going to set your mind on, or are you just going to let your travels take you where they may?
Everybody brings up the Tommy Dreamer thing. I think it's on my Wikipedia page. I did a few shows. I love Tommy. I did a few shows like over a year ago. I mean, wrestling was my passion, and that's what I was really passionate about, because I was on the road 52 weeks a year. I didn't really know what else was out there, so I'm not really passionate about anything that I could think of at this time. So in the past over 2 years, since I've been away, I was done 14. So yeah, we're approaching 3 years. I've just, anything that's popped up that sounds fun, I said, okay, I'll try it. So I do a lot of voiceovers. I did some announcing for boxing on CBS Sports. I've done some TV shows. I'm doing a movie as soon as I get back from this tour.
Oh, cool.
Just anything that pops up that sounds fun, I give it a shot. This is my third Tool tour. And, you know, just kind of go where the wind blows me and see what else I might enjoy.
Sounds like fun. One last question. David Penzer wins the lottery, $100 billion, and I decide to start a wrestling company. I'm going to buy time on TNT and starting David Penzer's Monday Night Show, and we're going to tour the world, and I'm starting a wrestling company, and I want Justin Roberts as my ring announcer. You ready to go back full-time, or you've had enough?
Man, I just had this conversation today at the pool with one of the guys I'm on tour with. The road was home for a long time. And then when I got off the road, it was like, it's kind of weird being off the road. And then after a real short amount of time, I got really used to being home, and I really like being at home. So I love wrestling. I love the idea of creating wrestling, producing it. I like producing. I've been producing for there's Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and they have a sister company in Arizona. And I've been going there just to produce the guys behind the scenes. And I love it. I love teaching them all the little things that I've learned over the years. So I enjoy that. As far as going out on the road full time and being a ring announcer, I don't know. Maybe if it was one day a week or something, that wouldn't be too bad.
No, we're running Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in this scenario. It's in our dream scenario. I will tell you that I also found that I enjoy doing things behind the scenes way more than being in the ring, which is really funny because my whole life has been in the ring. But it's funny how we both had that. You know, Justin, I appreciate you for joining me in the middle of a busy tour for the first episode of my podcast, Sitting Ringside.
Yes, and I'm honored to be the first, and I wish you the best of luck with this.
Thank you. There's not a lot of us. It's sort of a unique fraternity. It's sort of a unique fraternity.
What people don't realize is a ring announcer was there for everything. A ring announcer was at all the house shows, all the TVs, all the pay-per-views, talking to the guys in the opening match, talking to the guys in the main event. You know, ring announcers were there with everybody, watching everything. So you watch more matches from beginning to end and more shows from beginning to end than anybody else. You see a lot as a ring announcer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Roberts, best seat in the house. If you haven't read it, you're missing out. It's a great story and an honest tale of somebody who lived their dream. And I certainly suggest downloading it on Kindle right this minute. I did it. It took a minute.
Thank you, David.
So I hope what you got is two old ring announcers, one older than the other, just chatting about their lives. And I definitely wanted to talk more about Justin than myself. We got plenty of time to talk about myself in the future and his interesting story. And I do urge you to read the book. There's a lot he didn't want to go into in depth about issues with the company that I think would be very enlightening, even if you disagree with them. So, like I said, honest to a fault. And I want to thank Justin very much. If you like that, if you even like that a little, I think you should subscribe to this podcast because you're going to love what we got coming up for you. We're going to start doing our behind the spotlight segments. And I really think if anything we do here catches on, I really think that those will catch on. I think you're going to hear some stories from some people that you may not know, but some stuff that stuff that maybe a wrestler doesn't want to say because they don't want heat, but maybe somebody who worked behind the scenes doesn't care. And we're going to tell some WCW stories as well. My associate producer, Mike Freeland, is going to jump on here and there and see if you enjoy us talking WCW. He's going to pick out a highlight without telling me, and I'm going to do my best to remember what happened and tell some interesting, hopefully amusing stories about things that you may not know about that happened to behind the scenes, behind the cameras, at Ringside. So we appreciate you joining us for our first venture, and I know they'll only get better. And until next week, I'm still sitting ringside. Take care, guys.
Follow David Penzer on Twitter @DavidPenzer. Also, make sure to follow the show on Twitter @PenzerRingside. You've been sitting ringside with David Penzer on Radio Influence.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.